Well, happy Father's Day. One of my favorite stories that Adrian Rogers tells is about a little boy who's in about third grade named Billy Bob. And his father had been in the hospital and died in the hospital. And one of his best friends afterwards asked him, well, did your dad have any final words to say? And Billy Bob, without missing a beat, said, nope, he didn't. Mother was with him to the very end. That's one of those stories I'm allowed to tell on Father's Day. At least I hope so. Now we're taking a brief break from our series out of Psalms on how life feels. And what I'd like to talk to you today about is discipleship. Discipleship, what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. In the passage we're going to look at in Luke chapter 14, it said, great crowds followed Jesus. Now in our own day, an age, whenever you want to start a movement, immediately people think about Facebook ads and Instagram, get a Twitter account. Jesus didn't do any of those things. In fact, what he did was the exact opposite. Nobody set up a hashtag Jesus sign up or JesusMovement.com. In fact, what Jesus said are three things that are just almost shocking. Luke 14:26. If anyone would come after me, let him deny, verse 26. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers, sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. What is that about? Verse 27. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. What does it mean to bear your own cross? Verse 33. So therefore, whoever of you does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Now, if we're going to understand those three things, or what it means to be a disciple, we have to remember that Jesus came. He came to deal with the problem of sin. He didn't come to set up a new religion or to get people to try to be better. He came to deal with this issue of sin. Isaiah 53 verse 6 says, all of us like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. And this is what the Bible describes as sin. Now, if you want to take the simplest way I know of describing sin is the circle represents each of us. And inside of us, in our heart, as people, we have a throne. Who sits on the throne of your life? What it means to be a sinful person, a sinner, is that the big I sits on the throne of life. And that creates all kinds of problems in our life. It's sort of like, we've been going through this COVID thing. Well, there's a different virus, and it's the virus of sin. And sin makes a mess of relationships. It makes a mess of our life. It makes a mess of our destiny. And this sin virus also functions sort of like cancer. It can metastasize. It gets longer and stronger tentacles inside of us and makes us more self-centered as time goes on. What is particularly disturbing about the sin virus inside is that it's hard for us to detect it in ourselves. If you've ever had cancer, you may have had cancer and not even know you had it for a while. What's the antidote to this issue of sin and the big I sitting at, it's what Jesus deals with in our passage today, Luke 14. If you're taking notes, he's going to deal with three different arenas of what it means to follow Christ. And if you're taking notes, each word starts with the letter P. The first one is people. He said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Now you think, what in the world does he mean about hating my father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters? Are we supposed to love each other? Well, certainly we are. We're to love our wife, we're to love our kids, we're to love our neighbors, we're even commanded to love our enemies. So what does it mean that we're supposed to hate our father and mother, etc.? Well, Jesus is using what some of my English teachers tried to drill into me, Hyperbole. It's making an exaggerated statement to drive home a point. We do that all the time. No, I just used hyperbole all the time. What does he mean here? What he's describing is, remember, we're dealing with the problem of sin. And that is, if I add a person or people up there on that throne that I am expecting will meet my deepest needs and come through for me, I am going to make a mess of things. People is the first P in our three little sections that Jesus describes. People. People. Now, what happens when we put somebody up on that throne with us, expecting they're going to meet our needs? You can expect the following 6 things to unfold. The first is you are going to become dependent on that person's responses to you. The second thing is that you are then going to create expectations of the kinds of responses that you're going to get from that person. The third is when those expectations aren't fully met, you're going to begin to pressure that person or those people to come through for you. The fourth thing is that you're going to claim that you have a right to that response. And the fifth one is that you're going to find a demanding spirit growing in you. And sixth is that all of this is going to feel justified. Now, what I've just described to you is what Jesus calls wickedness. Wickedness. In Matthew 24:12, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Cold. You cannot expect that you're going to put somebody or people up there on that throne with you and expect that it's going to go well. This is the problem of sin regarding people. Now, if we do that, what ends up happening is the me first virus appears. First my ideas, then I'll listen to your ideas. First my opinions, then your opinions. I think my opinions are better than your opinions. My desires first, then your desires. My needs first, then your needs first. Even when we think we have a love that doesn't have self-regarding in it, like raising a little one when they're so cute. We always have a vested interest. It's always in play. And there's always a payoff, even if we're not aware of it at the middle. Now, what's the antidote? The antidote to the big I and putting people up there is to put Jesus on the throne, which is what he's describing here. And that people that we don't expect people to come through for us. We don't put them up there. We don't make them idols as for our ultimate satisfaction. This is the first thing he's saying here in this particular passage. The first word is person. The second word is plot. And by plot, what I mean is some type of outcome. I hope on Father's Day lunch, when my in-laws come over, we'll have a good time today. I hope Christmas goes better than last year with the wicked stepmother coming over. Or it can be longer-term things like your career. And what he's describing here is our propensity, and I'm calling all of these things as plot, is we put those things, or some of those things, up there on the throne as well. And when we do, we're going to make a mess of things. Jesus says, here's how he puts it. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Now, My mother, when I was growing up, used to say, everyone has their cross to bear. Well, that's not what Jesus means here. A cross is an instrument of death. And what he's describing is that the big I here needs to undergo a death inside the heart. I need to step down from the throne and let somebody else be alive on that throne. That's what he's describing here. Romans 6:12 through 14 describes this. Let not sin therefore reign. If it's sitting on the throne, if I'm sitting on the throne, sin will reign in your mortal bodies to make you obey their passions. Do not yield your members to sin as instruments of wickedness, but yield yourselves to God as men who have been brought from death to life, and your members to God as instruments of righteousness. Now, what is so ironic about sin is that we may think that we are the masters of ourselves by the things that we are trying to control, but what the Bible tells us is that we will be mastered instead by the things we put up there on the throne. And this is one of the awful paradoxes of sin. This is what Jesus is trying to deal with us and trying to help us with. Now, after dealing with people, we are to put what I'm calling plots or outcomes off of the throne and let Jesus be the determiner of what happens for my satisfaction and my needs. Now, after dealing with people and plots, he tells two very short parables. And we call these the count the cost of discipleship parables. Here's the first one. Which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Every good businessman or woman does this. Hopefully you do this with your home budget. What are our responsibilities, and do we have enough income to meet those responsibilities? We're not going to buy a house we can't afford. We're not going to buy a car we can't afford. Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish it. For years, our church used to go down to the Door of Faith Orphanage in Mexico. And I remember that for a number of years, there was a building about 20 stories tall that was a picture of this particular parable. All you saw for 20 stories up was concrete. And it was 20 stories high. The outer walls were concrete, and you could see the cutouts for where the sliding glass doors, the regular doors, and windows were going to be in place. But for years and years and years, the project was never finished. And Jesus says, that is not a good idea. If you don't count the cost, you can expect failure, shame, waste, and loss to occur. The second parable of counting the cost, verse 31. What king going to war with another king will not first sit down and take counsel whether with 10,000 men he's able to meet an army of 20,000? If not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends an embassy and asks terms of peace. Of course you should do that. You count the cost of going to war. The cost of discipleship is not just kind of an easy believism. I'll go to church when I want to. I'll give when I want to. I'll read the Bible occasionally. That's not how being a Christian works. You're going to find your Christian life anemic if you think that's how it is. There is a cost to this and some intentionality to it. Now, we've looked at plot or person that we have on the throne that needs to be removed. We have plot. The third thing he mentions has to do with possessions. And this comes from verse 33. So therefore, whoever of you does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Possessions. Possessions. Now, what does he mean by renounce all my possessions. Does this mean I'm supposed to sell my house, sell my car, sell most of my clothes, and live as a hermit? Now, remember the context and remember the language that Jesus is using. The context is he's trying to help us see the problem of sin and what's required to deal with it. And he's using hyperbole. Now, what he's saying here is that all of us take possessions, and we also place them up on that throne. And when we put possessions up on that throne, we're going to make a mess of things. If my satisfaction and my needs are met, say, by the house I live in and the kind of job I have and the clothes I wear and the cars I drive, vacations I take, when things are going well, then it's going to seem like it works. But when I get laid off or have to sell my house or sell my cars, then a whole different kind of thing is happening. Or if possessions are on there, they can make a mess with the wife if she has a different set of possessions up on her throne. Renounce all that he has, cannot be my disciple. Now, there's no greater, what needs to happen here is that possessions also need to be taken off the throne and given to Jesus in my heart. What is it I am relying on for my greatest needs to be met? Now, there's no greater decision you're ever going to make in your life than who's sitting on the throne. And you have a choice. Who's going to be the pilot of your plane? You can try to do it. Good luck with that. Jesus offers a different way. He needs to be on the throne. Now, I'd like to finish, because it's Father's Day, with a little Father's Day challenge for our guys that are dads. And some of us are now also grandfathers. I'd like to give you 3 challenges. Number 1, building a marriage and children doesn't just happen. It takes time. We're talking about the long game here. This is not just because you get married and just because you bring a baby home from the hospital doesn't mean that you're going to have a good marriage and you're going to be a great dad. Learning to be a husband and a father takes time. It's a long game. You have to just look at yourself and realize you have a lot to learn. You better adopt this learner attitude. What we have to build, it takes intentionality. It doesn't just happen, and it's costly. You can expect that important things are going to cost you something. Now, what does this cost us? It costs you 3 things. Number 1 is autonomy. Autonomy. When you and I were single, we could kind of come and go and do whatever we wanted to, and nobody really minded all that much. But if you're married, those days are over. You can't just come and go as you want to anymore. Do what you want to, spend what you want to, go where you want to. If you insist on living as a single man, then there's just coming a time when you're going to need to call your attorney. Maybe it's the office of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, and draw up divorce papers. I don't know any woman that's going to want to live with a man who wants to be single and live as if he's single. That is truly a bad idea. No woman signs up for her husband to be a boy. What she wants to live with is a man who takes his relationships and his responsibilities seriously. He learns to defer his own desires, and he learns to make joint decisions along with her. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. It can't be any clearer than that, I don't think. The first thing we cost us is our autonomy. The second thing is our pride. It's easy to assume that now that I'm married, I know what to do. I know how to relate to a wife. Those are terrible decisions. if you think you know how to relate to a wife, well, just hang on. You're in for an education. You have got to be a learner. As it relates to pride, it's easy to assume that what my wife and I are running is a business venture at home. We are providing a place and an outlet for our kids to grow up through high school and to get their degree and to go off to college someday and to get their degree and enter the world of adults as responsible adults. Well, no, certainly those things are true. But this is something much greater than a business adventure. As a husband and as a father, your central task is to model for your children some important things. If you have sons, you want them to see in what they see from you. How do I relate to a woman? How do I do this when there's a miscommunication or a misunderstanding? When she has hurt feelings? What does it mean to be a man in these kind of situations? If you have daughters, you want to give your daughters the clearest picture as you can of the kind of man that's worth waiting for to marry, to entrust the rest of your life to. Just being a nice guy, I've talked to lots of wives who married a nice guy, and they have a lot of regret about doing that. The curriculum that you are modeling for your children is important in terms of how do you live life, how do you make decisions, how do you deal with building a marriage and as a father. The last thing that you sacrifice is coasting. Coasting. You can't rest on your laurels as a husband and as a father, no matter how much you've built up to this point. You are always challenged to move towards relationships and responsibilities and to push the ball down the field in both of these. Jesus finishes our little passage today on discipleship with a third parable. He says, salt is good. I like salt. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is fit neither for the land nor the dunghill. Men throw it away. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. It is possible to lose your saltiness as a husband. It is possible to lose your saltiness as a father. It is possible to lose your saltiness in your personal life. It is possible to lose your saltiness as a man. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. What are we supposed to hear? You have a choice. If you insist on living your life how you want to live it, good luck. But when you discover that your saltiness is losing its flavor, you still have a choice. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you that you take us with how we are, with the big I sitting on the throne, and that you welcome us even when we've been sinners and proud and arrogant, and we know what to do, and so self-centered and yet not even aware of it. We are such a mess, and yet you love messes, and Jesus Christ came to die for messes, and to die that he might live in the heart of each man, and that we might learn what it means to be a real man, to be a real husband, a real father in this world. If you've never given your heart to Jesus, it is a simple thing, a simple step. Just acknowledge that you are a sinner, that the big I sits on the throne in your life, and that you need somebody else sitting on that throne. Jesus Christ died on a cross to give you a new life and to begin to give you a new nature. Take him up on it. We're going to move into our next song. It's called Love Like Rain. I love this song. It's the story of the prodigal son. And maybe just now If you moved from this board to this other board, you are no longer a prodigal.